Thank you everyone for coming here this afternoon. We've been talking in the last few weeks about examples from the great designer, from the Designwatch website, which show how God's creation has taken place on the earth. Today, we're going to focus on the eye, the cell, and animal navigation. Roy Toms, who's the Christadelphian who put together the Designwatch seminar or website, he likes to design things. He's been designing things throughout his life. And it was his thinking about the design process that got him thinking about putting this website together. What he said was, when you've got a project, you don't just start from the beginning and add things and see what you end up with. Rather, you think of the end goal. What do I actually want to create? And then you work back. How can I make it? So he says you have a goal in mind, a picture of where you want to get to, and then you work out how you're going to get there. Just think about the Sydney Opera House. The most remarkable thing about the Sydney Opera House is the shape of the roof. It's unique, attention-catching, a magnificent design which is recognised as one of the best features of buildings throughout the whole world. The designer, John Hudson, was an architect, and he designed the Sydney Opera House, winning a competition in 1957. And they started work on the Performing Arts Centre in the next year. And while he had the outline of the design, there was still a lot of detail to work out. It actually took them 16 years to build the Sydney Opera House, having problems along the way. And the weight of the roof was too much for the walls, and had to rethink it out. For example, they had to sink 588 years into the water to support the building, and build a massive podium in which the whole structure was going to stand. And it took the team, the design team, and the engineering team at least 12 attempts to work out how they were going to actually make the roofs. They couldn't put them up as they were standing on the structure, uneconomic. So they had to build it on the ground, prefab. But as they completed each shell, they then took measurements and worked out what the shape of the next shell was going to be. And actually one of the first users of a computer system to design the structure. And the building had to be able to withstand enormous forces, wind, water, because you can imagine the wind catching those sails when it's howling down the Sydney Harbour.
Just trying to pick up the mic a bit.
So finally, they completed the building in 1973, and it's now listed as a World Heritage Site. Why am I talking about this when we're talking about God's creation? Because I'm trying to illustrate the design process. The architects and engineers involved with the Opera House knew what they wanted to achieve, but they had to work out how to get there. So if we then transpose that situation onto evolution, the creature in the early stages of evolution is supposed to be able to develop itself to make things better. But if it can't think what's better, how can this work? If the creature was blind, how can it understand the benefits of having an eye when it can't see around it? It has no concept other than perhaps feel. And if it can't understand what sight means, why is it going to develop an eye? The Opera House needed the work of outside consultants to design it before it could actually happen. And so we say creation can't just happen. It needed a great designer to form the world and its inhabitants, a designer who had in mind what the end goal was going to be. And since we've just talked about sight, we're going to talk about the eye, hopefully. That was the building of the Sydney Opera House. Go back to where we... So I've just lost screen sharing, Dave.
I'm trying to play the video. Where's the video inserted? The video is here.
Yeah, I need to go to that one.
Okay. Come on,
Go to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got screen sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Screen sharing is lost.
Working that.
Joys of technology.
Should be good to go again.
But in Proverbs we read about the eye, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. So how does the eye work? It's a very complex construction, but it's so vital to our lives. Think what life would be without sight. And then think how the earliest creatures got on if they didn't have eyes. If evolution was true, the image that we look at comes in through the eye, comes through the lens, and it's transposed to the back of the retina. And then the image there is converted through a chemical and electrical process to become an electric signal that goes down the optic nerve to the brain. The eye doesn't just look straight. Look to the sides, up, down. We can focus long sight. We can do short sight. All these things can be done as the lens contracts and expands. We can adapt to light and to darkness. We can shut our eyes to help us sleep. We can blink our eyelids to lubricate the eyes. All these things work together to help our sight. And the eye is so complex that this is what Dr. Alan Burder, a US optometrist, said 11 years ago. He said it was possible, if it was possible for a computer chip to replicate what the retina does, a computer chip would have to be 500,000 times bigger than our retinas and would weigh about 45 kilograms. So imagine having 45 kilograms in your eye. The retina, though, that does the same job as this computer chip if it could be done, it weighs less than a gram. It requires a minute amount of electrical power. A seeing computer would require 300 watts of electrical power, and it would need a cooling system as well. And of course, the end result of this computer chip would be worse sight than what our eyes generally provide. The retina has the equivalent of 25 billion computer transistors. Now, we know computers have developed a lot in the last 11 years, but surely there's a long way to go to make up that gap. So if man, and we're supposedly the superior creature on the earth today, if we can't replicate the human eye, how on earth can we be expected to believe that eyes develop through evolution? In the supposed process of natural selection, individual organisms develop traits which made them superior and more likely to survive. But how could they, with limited brain power, develop such a complex organ like the eye? Surely there would need an outside force, the intelligent designer, God, to create the eye. Even Charles Darwin himself, writing about the origin of the species, said in abridged terms, to suppose that the eye with its various characteristics could have been formed by natural selection seems to be absurd. But then later on, Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist, said in 1986 that the eye was designed the wrong way round. He said this was proof that intelligent design couldn't have designed the eye because he thought things were the wrong way round. Well, I'm going to play a video which sets out much better than I can how Dawkins is wrong and how the eyes of the animal world fail to show any evidence of a steady development of the eye through evolution. This is a video called Be Grateful for the Intelligent Design of Your Eyes.
The human eye is a marvel of engineering. Able to detect light down to a single photon, it is a powerful tool that makes possible so many other wonders of human technology and art. Whether or not the eyes are the windows of the soul, as the ancients believed, they are certainly our windows to the world. Today, the human eye is a centerpiece in the debate over evolution. Both sides claim it as evidence for their argument. Charles Darwin expressed doubt at first that evolution could produce the eye.
To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree.
But Darwin didn't stop there. While it seems impossible for natural selection to have produced the eye, Darwin thought he had found a way around the problem.
He said that if we could find a series from the simplest to the most complex of these various kinds of eyes, then the objection to his theory should go away. Well, when we look at modern animals, we do find, in fact, a range of eyes, ranging from the simplest, that is a simple light-sensitive spot, to the most complex, namely the human eye. That's what we have in animals that are alive today.
Darwin, and evolutionists after him, relied on these small gradations in modern animals to overcome the vast improbability of building an eye through an unguided process. Prominent atheist Richard Dawkins said that natural selection designed complex features by breaking the improbability up into small manageable parts, smearing out the luck needed, going round the back of Mount Improbable and crawling up the gentle slopes. For Dawkins, the gentle slopes take the form of different types of eyes in nature, all displaying various amounts of complexity, However, there are countless missing stages in the evolutionary story of the vertebrate eye. Darwin, and now Dawkins, assume rather than demonstrate these innumerable missing stages. Something more is needed to truly demonstrate the evolution of the eye.
To do that, we would have to go back in the fossil record and see how eyes started out simple and then evolved into more complex eyes. The problem with the fossil record is that when we go back to the first animals we find, the complex eyes are already there. Trilobites, which appeared in the Cambrian explosion when all the major groups of animals first appeared, trilobites have very complicated eyes, very much like the eyes of modern insects. Other animals that were found in the Cambrian explosion appear to have camera eyes, like our eyes. There are no ancestors for these animals in the fossil record, so there's no evidence that these complex eyes evolved from simpler ones. They were there right from the start.
Evolutionists continue to argue that because so many different kinds of eyes exist, they must evolve easily. Yet with complex eyes arriving so early on the scene, and with no evidence of precursors, Darwin's small gradations disappear. There may be different kinds of eyes in nature, but they are chronologically out of order from a Darwinian perspective, and there is no apparent evolutionary history leading up to them. But there is a second way that evolutionists use the eye as an icon of evolution. They claim that, despite its appearance of perfect design and its usefulness to us, the eye is, in fact, badly designed.
The human eye has become an icon of evolution in two senses, two rather different senses. In one sense, the eye is thought to have evolved very easily. That has been argued by evolutionary biologists. But at the same time, the human eye, as they put it, is wired backwards. And evolutionary biologists claim that this is a flaw because evolution was unguided. It had to work with what it had at the time, and this, they say, is evidence for evolution. Camera eyes are found in humans and also in cephalopods, that is, squids and octopuses. Camera eye has a lens, and it focuses the light on the back of the eye to make a nice, crisp, clear image. In cephalopods, the light-sensitive cells that detect the light face forward toward the lens. In a human eye, actually in all vertebrate eyes, the light-sensing cells face backwards, away from the light. And some defenders of Darwin, Richard Dawkins among them, have said that this is evidence that the eye is flawed, the human eye is flawed, and it's an accident that grew out of its evolutionary history. It should never have been this way. But actually, when people study the eye, and they have, in great detail, it turns out that the orientation of the light-sensing cells is just about optimal in the human eye.
This is a human retina. Here you can see that the layer of cells at the back of the eye-sensing rods and cones that detect light, are pointed backwards, toward the back of the eye.
And behind them are several layers. One is a layer of blood cells, another is a layer of epithelial cells between the blood cells and the light-sensing cells. And the blood cells and the epithelial cells nourish the light-sensing cells, which have a very high metabolic requirement, among the highest in the human body. If the eye were designed the way Darwinian evolutionists say it should be, and we turn these light-sensing cells around to face the lens, these blood vessels and the cells that help them transmit things to the light-sensing cells would have to be in front of the light-sensing cells and would block the light. We would be almost blind. So that's why our light-sensing cells face the rear, because they're being nourished by this blood supply that, if it were in the front, would block the light.
Despite the continued research into the design of the eye and the ongoing revelation that it is an exceptionally sensitive instrument, defenders of Darwinian evolution continue to use this as an example of the trial and error outcomes of natural selection.
Arguments for the optimal design of the eye are not coming from intelligent design proponents. They're coming from mainstream scientists who study the function of the eye. It's based on the evidence. So the defenders of evolution who continue to insist that the eye is flawed are doing so in the face of the evidence. In the last few years, scientists have discovered that a particular kind of cell in the eye, called the Mueller cell, acts like a waveguide. It actually comes all the way through the retina and brings light coming in through the lens all the way to the back of the retina and makes the images much clearer. It's actually an engineering marvel. When Kenneth Miller, who is the author of a textbook widely used in high school biology classes, was confronted with this evidence recently, his reaction was, well, that just shows that evolution then corrected the flaw that it put there. So evolution produced a flawed eye and then corrected it by adding these other cells that improve things. The problem with that is we have no evidence that the human eye was first flawed and then these cells appeared. There's no historical record to show that. And second of all, why does it make any sense to say that now the human eye is very good, but only because evolution corrected its own flaw? I mean, to me, it's just it's a desperate attempt to hang on to the materialistic story in spite of the evidence. It's zombie science.
The human eye is a marvel of engineering. Able to detect light down to a single photon, it is a powerful tool that makes possible so many other wonders of human.
So I hope you understood all that. That shows the remarkable construction for the eye. Now we're going to talk about the cell. So a cell is the smallest unit that can live on its own. All living organisms are made up of cells, whether they're plants or animals, fish or human beings. A cell has three main parts: a membrane, a nucleus. The nucleus is the purple and white color part in the middle. And then within the nucleus, there's the cytoplasm. Sorry, the cytoplasm is between the nucleus and the membrane. And within the nucleus is the DNA, the genetic blueprint of a living organism. And the cell membrane controls all the substances that go in and out of the cell. Most cells are less than 1/10 of a millimeter in length. So just think what the cell's got within it in that 1/10 of a millimeter. Incredible amount. So we have, as human beings, we have around 37 trillion cells in our body. And within each cell, the human DNA strands, if you pull them out of the cell, one cell, they would be 2 meters long. Multiply that by 37 trillion. And the length of the DNA within our body would go around twice the width of the solar system. Absolutely incredible. A cell is not just one type. There are different cells for different tasks. Our breathing system needs red cells and white cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen around our body in the blood. White blood cells help our body to fight infection. It's been suggested there are 300 to 400 different kinds of cells. And there are different types of cells because they're required for the different systems within our body. So there are 11 different systems within our body. For example, the digestive system, the skeletal system, the nervous system, the immune system, the reproductive system. And within each system, there are specialist cells that have their own particular job to do. It's the DNA of the cell that determines what job it's going to do. And these specialist cells each have their own different protein requirements. And they can switch off and on the genes required to produce the right proteins. So effectively, we can say each type of cell has its own software program to run. Now we're going to show you a short video that give you an idea of these different types of systems in the body.
This is a cell, the basic unit of life. How cells work together to help us meet the challenges of everyday life and what happens when things go wrong are some of the most fundamental questions being addressed by physiologists today. An estimated 200 cell types exist in the human body, each one with its own job. However, there are at least as many microbial cells as human cells, and these microbial cells are important for health, disease, and nutrition. Up close, you can see clues as to what they do. Take enterocytes. These cells that line the small intestine have small finger-like projections, giving them a large surface area that's perfect to absorb nutrients. Each cell in the body performs its own specific roles, and when cells work together, they form tissues that allow more coordinated control of the body. There are 4 types of tissue: epithelial, muscle, nervous, and connective. Back in the small intestine, we see how multiple cell types interact to give a tissue its unique function. Here, enterocytes work alongside goblet cells that secrete a gel-like substance to protect the cell from bacteria. And antimicrobial Paneth cells help keep the gut safe from infection. Gut microbes also play an important role in digesting food, breaking down toxins, making vitamins, excluding harmful pathogens, and teaching our immune systems to respond appropriately. The epithelial tissue, together with connective tissue, muscle tissue, glands, blood vessels, and neurons, working together make up the small intestine organ. Organs like this are the next level up in the functional hierarchy of the body, and when they link up with other organs to perform a specific function, they become a system. The small intestine, along with the mouth, stomach, liver, and other organs, make up the digestive system, one of the 11 systems in our bodies. Each one has its own main function, but they all need to cooperate with each other to keep the body healthy. Take the digestive system. Its role is to break down food to be absorbed by your body. To ensure that nutrients are distributed to all the right places, it relies on the circulatory system, which also carries hormones from the endocrine system that helps to regulate digestion and absorption of nutrients. And when we see or smell food, the nervous system gets involved, prompting us to start salivating and preparing us for digestion. Integrated systems like this are essential to our survival, but their interconnection can have a downside. Take a condition like type 1 diabetes. This is an endocrine problem that means cells in your pancreas are unable to produce insulin. Insulin allows glucose uptake into all cells, where it's used as an energy source. This is principally an endocrine problem, but it can have a knock-on effect, causing secondary issues throughout the body, particularly in the circulatory system and the nervous system. This shows how the disruption of just a few cells can cause a cascade of negative impacts across multiple systems. Physiologists study the complex interaction of cells, tissues, organs, and systems in the body. Knowing more about this delicate balance means we can better understand how our bodies work in health and disease. This is a cell.
That noise. So, it's a very complicated process in our bodies. You can see that. In the book, Your Design Body, the author posed these questions. What is it that causes certain cells to run these different programs? How does the body know which cells need which proteins? Where do these programs come from, and how are they encoded? And we're talking here about thousands of different proteins. How could such programming come to be? The level of control is off the charts. Researchers around the world are putting together a cell atlas to increase our understanding of the 37 trillion cells in our bodies. There's so much complexity to understand in the world of cells. How could this all come about by accident? As we saw in the last video, the systems in the human body interact with one another. How would this work under evolution if the human body's in transition? Not quite a human being, it's something before a human being. We've got the eating system, but we haven't got the blood system, or whichever way around it's supposed to be. How would the cell that started know how to create all the different types of cells? How would the body be kept alive in this transition stage? And where do we find half-developed creatures in the world today? I really think you need to have more faith in evolution than you do in an intelligent designer. We're told in Genesis 2, verse 7, "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into the nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being." So first the man Adam was formed, but he wasn't yet alive. But everything was there already. The cells and internal systems were in place. And then God gave him the breath of life. And then the man started to live. That makes more sense when you see how complicated the body is. It's so much more believable than evolution. The cells are one of the greatest things in creation to help us understand that the only all-powerful God could have made this. Well, now we're going to go from something a little less complicated, but still remarkable. And that's talking about animal navigation. The ability for animals to navigate over long distances. And one example is the bar-tailed godwit. It makes an annual migration from Alaska to Antarctica, to Alaska, Australia and New Zealand, and sometimes stopping at China on the way. And down the road at Boondall Wetlands, that's one of the places where this bar-tailed godwit lands after its journey from Alaska, non-stop. One bird was recorded as flying non-stop from New Zealand to Alaska, a distance of 11,500 kilometres in just 8 days. Another bird, the Arctic tern, has the longest migration of any animal. It goes from near the North Pole to Antarctica, a round trip of around 40,000 kilometres. The question for us is, how do these birds know where they're going to? They don't have the benefit of GPS. Well, there's several ways in which they can find their way. One is the magnetic compass. Just as we use a compass to find magnetic north, so animal life has the ability to use the Earth's magnetic field. Birds, for example, have magnetic receptors in their retina, their nose, beak, and inner ear. And the essential component of these receptors is magnetite, which is an iron oxide. And so a variety of animals have the ability to construct perfect crystals of biogenic magnetite. But with these magnetites, then they've got to be integrated with the animal's nervous system and then have the intelligence to be able to use the signals they're getting. And so having this sensor gives them an idea where north is, and then they have to calculate the angle of direction they need to go in to go where they're going. And it has to maintain that angle through the whole journey, also compensating for wind and weather. Did this come about by chance? Surely it's created by the great designer. Not only is there the work in creating the animals with these characteristics, but also linking it to the fact that the Earth's got a magnetic field, also designed by the great creator. The second way in which they get direction is using the sun as a compass. And we can tell roughly what time of day it is by looking at the position of the sun. But animals have developed this to a greater extent. The sun changes position, not just over the course of the day, but over the course of the year. It changes with latitude. But many animals have an internal clock, known as a circadian clock, and we've got circadian clocks too. We sleep more in winter because of that. But animals have this, where they use this clock to help them find direction. Even on a cloudy day, they can know where the position of the sun is. They have a way of, an instinct to know where the sun is. And we know animals have instincts. They can tell us there's a storm coming before we know about it. Animals also use the stars. There's a pole point in the northern hemisphere where the planets and stars go around. And in the southern hemisphere, it's the Southern Cross constellation. And birds can look at the stars and know their positions and where they can tell where they are. And the fourth way is creating a mental map, like the homing pigeon. You have an idea where it is, where it came from, and go back home. And animals may have more than one of these systems to use to help them find direction. Surely it's impossible with these amazing abilities in the natural world to happen. It can't be accident. It can't be a Darwinian system coming about through small random changes, each selected only for their value to help the species survive. The more we know about nature, the less evolution seems credible. Earlier this year, some of us went to Monrepo Beach near Bundaberg, and we watched the turtle hatchlings coming out of the sand and immediately head for the water. Those hatchlings, hours old, had an internal GPS programmed to use the Earth's magnetic field to give them direction, and also drawn by the moonlight shimmering on the water and the starlight too, knowing that they've got to get to the water. And then once they're in the water, they swim for 2 to 3 days, and then they find the great Australian current, Eastern Australian current, and that carries them to their feeding grounds in the Pacific Ocean. This is a remarkable world we live in. David, writing in Psalm 139, explains so well how God oversaw his development in his mother's womb. He wrote of God overseeing events as the maker of the amazing process by which a single cell becomes a new child. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. And we too should praise God for the creation he has made. There's no other logical explanation for the way that things work so wonderfully on this earth. And even better, we're not just dwelling in a creation of the past. God is still in control. He gives life and he takes it away. And what that means is that by believing in him and putting our trust in him, he has promised that he will reward the faithful by giving them eternal life in a world in the future which will be greatly blessed. So if we believe that God has made the extraordinary design of this world, then we can also believe that he can change our bodies to become immortal beings. And that's the hope we believe in. And we'd like you all to share that hope with us. Thank you.